I don't know how to make intros. Okay, so I'm taking part in a computer science 30 class and wanted to make a game for the final project. So I decided to treat the assignment like a game jam. I loaded up ChatGPT and got to give me a prompt, and it gave me Into the Depths. And for a bit of extra challenge, I decided to wait until there was only 2 weeks before the final project was due, so it would feel even more like a game jam. I totally wasn't just procrastinating. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's start making a game. The first thing that I needed to do was come up with an idea. And immediately, one idea came to mind. A roguelike. I originally fell on this idea because I've recently been playing a game called Enter the Gungeon, and been watching a devlog by Ben Bonk on the game Slime Keep. And both these games have really inspired me to try to make my own. So I hopped right into the project and started working on adding a character controller. I wanted some basic top-down movement and wanted to get an early start on the textures for the game, because a lot of the time I forget about those. So I created a character that looks fairly decent and gave him some eyes that look at the mouse, which took a little longer than I expected to get to work. But with that done, I started working on adding a undisclosed object to the game. This is a school project. I'm not allowed to call it objects. With the object in this scene, I gave it a function to spawn and shoot bullets that would go at Mach speed and destroy anything in sight. With that done, I started to work on a tile map. This was my first time ever using tile maps, so I looked at a tutorial and then on one by Bari that helped me understand how they work. With this, I made a basic area for the player to move around in, as well as some textures for the walls and ground, which were by far the hardest textures to make in the game, for the sole reason that they had to connect to themselves in all directions without looking too repetitive, kind of like Minecraft cobblestone. With that out of the way, I threw in some dynamic lighting, which I also had to look up a tutorial for, and I found a video by The Dev Show, which helped me find my way through lighting, which really made my game look amazing. Now that I had some of the core components, I started to work on making some enemies, which is where I hit my real first roadblock. I couldn't figure out how I wanted to make my enemies work. I started by making a little slime dude, but I wasn't able to do much from there. And then I found my way over to a YouTube tutorial made by Mina Pachuk that gave one of the best descriptions of how enemy behaviors work, which I would highly recommend to check out if you're at all interested in enemy app. But I'll try my best to describe what the video talks about. Basically, in the enemy, there is a script called a behavior tree that will decide what the enemy does based on the world around it. Behavior tree will prioritize specific tasks over others and decide on which action to do, depending on the information it receives. This is a very much oversimplified version of it, but I think that's the basis of how it works. Now, after spending a couple hours implementing the behavior tree into the game, I got a basic slime enemy added to the game. The slime behavior tree would check if the player was in range, and if so, would set the player to be its target, and the slime will start bouncing towards the player. This would become the basis for almost every enemy in the game. But with that out of the way, I assigned a few damage and health values to the enemy, and now I had a finished working enemy. The next thing on my list was to make the enemies spawn in on their own. So I assigned a simple wave spawning system that would spawn enemies as well as some simple designs for wave counters. This didn't take me long to add in, and worked pretty well. With that done, I added in 2 enemies, spiders and the golems. Spiders were designed to be a weaker but faster version of the slimes, while the golems were designed to be a stronger but slower version of the slimes. Both these enemies shared one issue. I don't know how to make walking animations. So the spiders just spin their legs, and the golems, I made them fly because I couldn't be bothered to learn how to make a walking animation with what limited time I had. The next thing I added to the game was a way to heal the player as I realized I didn't give the player a way to do so. I also, at the same time, decided to add in a torch placing system so the player could light up the cave around them, which I reused a texture from the tile map torches. So with this, I had to implement two systems. I had to implement a item dropping system so the enemies would drop hearts and torches, as well as a way to make the torches decay their light, just to make it so you'd need to get more and more as the game went on. Now with all of that done, I decided to add in one last enemy to break up the combat a bit more. This was by far the hardest one to code, but I decided to make a bat that shoots sonic waves at the player. This was done by checking if the player was in range, and then copying a bit from the player shooting script so the bats would shoot sonic waves. Now that I was done, I started working on manually adding in waves 1 to 10. Until I realized something. I'm a programmer, I can automate this. So I whipped up a script that would generate the waves, that would get harder and harder past wave 10. And with that, the game was finished. Or so I thought. There's about 1 week left until the project was due, and I had thought of a wonderful idea. Would you rather? Which would give the player two equally horrible options to choose from. And whichever they pick would happen. So, with that, I got to work. I ended up making 40 textures for the Would You Rather tablets, which I'll now refer to as habituation tablets. And now there are a total of 400 options that the player can get. So, I quickly got to work coding in the tablets, which was by far the hardest part of the project. I gave each tablet two halves, top and bottom, which the top was a good option and the bottom was the bad option. And then I added in a text description that would pop up depending on the effect. For this, I threw in a script that would apply the effects of the tablet once it was clicked on. After I made that, so the players would get these options every 5 or so waves, which took a bit of work to get done. Eventually, I got all the effects working after several hours of debugging and hard work. And with that, I almost had everything done. All that there was left to do was some bug fixes and polish. There were lots of bugs here and there, and probably still are, but after a week or so of debugging the different features of the game was complete. Overall, this was a fun, great experience that I loved working on. It helped me learn a lot about game design and coding, and it helped me get a lot better at doing code and all that. And with getting this project finished, it was just a lot of fun to do. If you want to check out the game, I uploaded it to itch.io, and I'll have a link in the description. It was so much fun to make, and there's so much more I wish I could have shared about the creation of the project, but I have to get this video out within the next 6 hours as I'm writing the script, so I'll make a behind the scenes video if people are interested. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.